Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Keep Growing podcast. In this episode, we're going to take a look at hydroponic gardening. We'll consider the basic concepts of hydroponic gardening, its benefits, and how to get started. So, let's get started. Hydroponic gardening is the practice of growing plants without soil. Instead, plants are grown in a nutrient-rich water solution that provides everything they need to thrive. This method of gardening has been around for centuries, but it's only been in recent years that it's become more popular as easier methods have been developed and various off-the-shelf systems have hit the market. One of the biggest benefits of hydroponic gardening is that it allows you to grow plants in areas where soil conditions are poor or non-existent. This makes it an excellent option for urban areas or places with harsh climates. For example, in my region here in West Virginia, hydroponics at home allows me to grow veggies indoors during the cold winter months. Another benefit of hydroponic gardening is that it uses significantly less water than traditional soil-based gardening. This is because the water in the system is recycled, reducing the amount of water needed to grow plants. Additionally, hydroponic gardening can produce higher yields in less time than traditional soil-based gardening. This is because plants have constant access to nutrients and water, allowing them to grow at an accelerated rate. Now let's talk about how to get started with hydroponic gardening. There are several different methods you can use. I personally use a hybrid method, but one of the simplest is deep water culture, or DWC. To start, you'll need a container to hold the water and nutrients for your plants. This can be anything from a large plastic bin to a specially designed hydroponic system. I've even seen this method used with 5-gallon buckets. You also need a fountain pump to circulate the water and nutrients, as well as an air stone and air pump to oxygenate the water. Finally, you'll need a pH meter to monitor the acidity of the water and adjust it as needed. Again, personally, I use a pH test kit like you can find at pool supply stores. I also use an EC meter. More on that later. Once you have your supplies, you can start by filling your container with water and adding the appropriate nutrients. Then you'll suspend your plants in the water using a net pot or similar device. As your plants grow, you'll need to monitor the pH level of the water and adjust it as needed. You also need to keep an eye on the water level and make sure your pump and air stone are working properly. With these basic steps, you'll be well on your way to a thriving hydroponic garden. So, now let's dive into the details a bit further. Personally, I use an off-the-shelf system from a company called Let Us Grow. Get it? Let Us Grow? Anyhow, it's a modular tower that can hold up to 36 plants. What makes it unique is the way it circulates water. Many tower-type hydroponic systems are aeroponic towers, where they have a showerhead-like aerator at the top that sprays a fine rain of water down the center of an open tower. This wets the roots while also giving them plenty of oxygen. This system combines that concept with almost an ebb and flow setup. Instead of spraying a fine mist of water, the water slowly trickles down the tower on a set interval thanks to a timer hooked up to the pump. During the day cycle, when lights are on for my indoor system, the pump kicks on for 15 minutes once per hour. Then during the night cycle, when the lights are off, it runs for 15 minutes every 90 minutes. The lights themselves are set to run for 16 hours each day. Something unique about this system is the way that the lights are designed. It's not only designed with the plants in mind, but people too, since these systems are for home use. They're mostly white LEDs with some red mixed in to promote leaf growth. Standard grow lights by themselves are a mix of red and blue LEDs, which leads to a purple or pink glow. And that would be a bit annoying in the dining room where I keep my system. When I unboxed the system from Lettuce Grow, I should say as a bit of a disclaimer here that Bob's Market Greenhouses isn't associated in any way with Lettuce Grow, but I did get permission to talk about their product. Anyhow, when I unboxed it, I was pleasantly surprised to discover that J.R. Peters supplies the nutrients for their system. You see, we exclusively use J.R. Peters fertilizers at Bob's. We use their water-soluble fertilizers in the greenhouse, and we have for close to 50 years. Their nutrient mixes for hydroponics are a bit different. For one, it lacks their signature blue coloring, but it is also separated into an A-B mix. By adding part A and then part B, it keeps some of the nutrients from reacting and forming a precipitant. That's a fancy science term for the nutrients coming out of solution to form solid particles that sink to the bottom of the tank. Personally, my tap water is high in calcium, so I always have some iron that precipitates out. And that's where maintenance comes in. Each week I perform maintenance where I check the pH and nutrient levels and top off the tank, and trim any roots that are getting too long. Then once every 3 months, I do a quote-unquote reset where I take the system completely apart and give it a deep clean. During weekly maintenance, I keep a handy spreadsheet of data so I can track overall system health over time. I measure the air and water temperature, then I pull a small water sample to measure the EC. EC stands for electrical conductivity. Going back to high school science, we learned that pure water doesn't conduct electricity, but salt water does. The saltier the water, the easier it is for it to conduct electricity. So we can measure this electrical conductivity to know how salty the water is. It just so happens that plant nutrients, like phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, and many others, are salts. Based off the test results and some handy charts, I can decide how much of the nutrients I need to add to replace what has been taken up by the plants. Much like Brondo, it's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes.
Brondo's got what plants crave.
Yeah, it's got electrolytes.
What are electrolytes? Do you even know?
It's what they use to make Brondo.
Yeah, but why did they use them to make Brondo?
Because Bronto's got electrolytes.
Up next, after any added nutrients have had time to mix, I pull another sample to measure the pH. Now, there are fancy pH meters, but they have to be calibrated with test samples of known pH, and that's just a little bit too fiddly and time-consuming for just a quick weekly test. I use a test kit where you add drops of test solution to a water sample and the color changes based off the pH. Then you just compare the color to a chart. Then, based off the reading, which usually trends more basic as the week passes, you add a specific amount of pH down, basically plant-friendly acids, to drop the pH. Finally, the last step of weekly maintenance is trimming the roots. Unlike deep water culture, where long roots are your friend, long roots in my system can actually clog up the drain holes, or even worse, get sucked into the pump. I'm on my third pump. I've had tomato plants grow roots as long as 4 feet before. Giving them a simple trim with a kitchen knife works wonders. As I said before, the system can hold up to 36 plants. What I normally do is start 12 plants at a time every couple weeks. That way I always have a rotation of plants ready to harvest. The system does use a very small plug of soil for the initial seedling. I use a peat moss based product called Root Riot. Again, not affiliated with Bob's, but I use it to start my seedlings. It is a peat moss that's been treated with a binder to create something akin to a sponge. That way, it doesn't fall apart in the circulating water. Once every 3 months, I do what's referred to as a reset. I harvest all the plants, drain the water, disassemble the system, and give it a thorough cleaning. This is quite a job because over the previous 3 months, nutrient-rich water has evaporated and created crusty brown deposits everywhere. Cleaning it is tricky because you need a food-safe cleaner. The best thing I've found is vinegar. It might not smell great, but it works to dissolve the deposits with some warm water and scrubbing. Other than the time to do resets, the system is very easy to care for. It takes about an hour each week for maintenance, which comparatively speaking is less time than I spend in the garden. With our 36 plant stand, my wife and I easily grow enough veggies for salads and sandwiches each week, with room in the system for herbs like cilantro, dill, and basil. I usually fill up a large bowl a couple times per week with harvested greens, but I also tend to do what I like to call grazing. Unlike in the garden where you might have dirt, insects, and other things you don't want to eat, growing indoors means that the plants are perfectly clean right off the tower. It's easy just to pick a quick handful of lettuce for a sandwich, or just stand there and snack. I'm just hitting the high ground here and speaking mostly from my own experience. There's tons of different ways to grow hydroponically. For example, I'm on the advisory committee for a greenhouse program at a local trade school. They currently grow lettuce using a horizontal ebb and flow system where the plants are grown in rock wool cubes. The lettuce then supplies the food services program. Something that they're exploring is converting the system into an aquaponics system, where the water is circulated through a tank with fish. The fish then supply the fertilizer for the system, if you know what I mean. Yeah, poop. It's poop. Anyhow, as I said, there are tons of rabbit holes you can go down with hydroponics. The key is to do research, find a system that you think might work for you, and then just dive in. In my region, it offers the ability to grow fresh veggies even during the coldest winter days. In our next episode of the Keep Growing podcast, we're going to break out those gardening plans and take a look at early spring gardening. Just because there's still frost lurking around, it doesn't mean you have to hide indoors. There's plenty of frost-tolerant veggies that you can plant now for harvests in April, May, and June. Until next time, keep growing. Copyright 2023, Bob's Market and Greenhouses, Incorporated.